girl. Hey, and welcome to With a Gay Twist. We are a bi-weekly podcast hosted by two homosexuals who talk about news and politics, but with a gay twist. I'm Zach, and flames on the side of my face, breathing, heaving breaths.
And I'm Mason, and slowly, it's too nice a job to rush.
It is. On today's podcast, we are going to be talking about the confirmation hearing of Ketanji Brown Jackson for the U.S. Supreme Court. And a little bit later, we'll be learning about the queer person that we think you ought to know. Mason, who are we going to be learning about today?
We're going to be learning about the fabulous but the unknown Pamela Coleman Smith.
I don't know her.
Well, girl, get ready to know all about her.
Fascinating. I absolutely cannot wait.
You know, Zach, normally we have all this heavy, right? Normally it's all negative, but you want to hear some good news?
I need some good news.
Let's start this off right. So, Republicans have actually started to care about something that benefits people.
Oh my God. Seriously?
I know, right?
Mama, spill the tea.
They've actually started caring about Title IX and women in sports.
Are you serious? That is wonderful.
After decades of them not caring, of paying female soccer players a tenth of what male athletes get paid, after not caring about the WNBA,
the WNBA,
mocking them, almost causing it to kind of like drift away and shut down, they are actually throwing efforts towards women in sports.
Oh my God, I am so happy to hear that. Oh my God, Republicans, congratulations. Welcome to the...
And we're going to stop right there, though. Let's not give them accolades because it's not that great.
Oh God, I knew it was too good to be true.
It really is. So recently in the news, we've been seeing a lot going on about trans women in sports.
We certainly have.
And this is going to be our Interruption. That's right. It's the segment where we discuss the intersectionality between news, politics, and queerness.
Mason, spill the tea for me, hunty. What is happening with trans women in sports?
Okay. So, trans women in sports. Good news. Good news here.
Let's start with the good.
Let's start with the good, right? The good. So, Indiana Governor Holcomb recently vetoed a bill aimed at trans women in sports. He cited that this bill's language is too vague and that it needs to be sent back. Now, this is where it's a little kind of tricky for me to really get behind the reason of his veto, but he stated that the language is not there, that it covers too much, is too vague, is too broad, and that it needs to be re-examined and narrowed in order to fall underneath the fairness and sportsmanship categories.
Well, bully for him. Thank you for doing the right thing. And not only did he recently veto a bill in Indiana, but also Utah's governor also recently vetoed a bill. That's Governor Spencer Cox, who vetoed a bill just this week banning trans children from being able to play school sports. And he had a very wonderful approach to it, where he talked about the high suicide rate of trans kids, and the quote that he said was, "Rarely has so much fear and anger been directed at so few." So you would not really expect such modest support from a place like Utah, but here he is, Spencer Cox. Thank you, Governor Cox. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much. And, you know, what I found interesting is that the Indiana High School Athletic Association actually praised the veto of this trans bill that Governor Holcomb did. So recently they put out a statement in full support. They had, prior to this veto, refused to come out on either side of the issue of trans athletes. Just they refused to touch it, didn't want to get into it, right? Well, what's interesting is that the High School Athletic Association in Indiana actually already has procedures to assess competitive advantage in trans athletes' performance. So, in order to be allowed to compete in, I would love to say men's sports, but that's never in question. It's always trans women uh, participating in female sports and women's sports.
Well, let me ask you about
So,
that, Mason.
oh my
What
gosh.
what is up exactly with these people so concerned with trans women and trans girls competing in women and girls sports, but yet you can't hear a whisper of their concern when it
Nothing.
comes to trans men and trans boys in male sports.
Nothing. Right. So the whole idea comes down to biology. Okay. And this is where everyone gets all up in arms over trans related topics. So, specifically in the sports world, they're looking at individuals that have gone through puberty. So, individuals that were born male that have gone through puberty and have had a increase in a buildup of testosterone in their system have benefited in a biological and physiological manner. And so, based on those biological conditions that happen during puberty and those changes, that then gives them an unfair advantage in sports when competing against females. And that's kind of the whole basis of why we have men's sports versus women's sports. You don't see a lot of co-ed sports, especially when you're talking at the collegiate level. You're talking at the international level, so you're talking at the Olympics, any type of the global stages that sports, competitive sports, are played, especially when it comes to strength and like physical performance.
I am so glad that you're here, Mason, to explain this because, as the type of homosexual who does not really engage in the sports, except for the occasional ones that takes place in water, I don't really know anything about sports. I was more of a choir kid myself, a chess club kid personally. So thank you for being an ally to the Straits to be able to serve as interpreter for me about all things sports.
This is where I get real butch.
Mm.
I played sports all throughout my life. I did soccer. I was a competitive swimmer for 8 years. I was in martial arts, equestrian sports. Like I did volleyball. I did it all.
Well, speaking of that, can I ask you equestrian?
Yes.
Did you ever go into any type of sport where the masculinity was so thick, the musk was so thick that you knew all these fellas are gay?
Swimming.
Swimming. Okay, cool. Interesting.
It's actually sort of kind of macho. Honestly,
In
especially
those
when you get into the
speedos,
in those speedos. Yes,
macho in those speedos.
yes. You
Really
should
clean.
hear what's going on in the locker rooms, especially when you get into water polo. So most swimmers, especially in high school, they will actually do swim one season, and then in the spring they do water polo. Water polo is extremely aggressive and extremely competitive. Not that swimming isn't, but I did not do water polo because I didn't want to get dragged underwater by my nutsack, and that literally happens in the pool.
Good times. Very
Yep.
straight.
Well,
Very straight.
very straight, very
Very
straight.
straight.
So, but back to the topic at hand. So, and that's kind of why the NCAA news story with DeSantis in Florida struck me really hard because I used to be a swimmer. So DeSantis recently has put out a proclamation stating who the winner of a NCAA competition is, because he didn't like the outcome, because it contradicted his own personal ideology that is not founded in science whatsoever.
It's like the judges going up to the three-tiered podium at the Olympics and putting the gold medal around the person on the lowest pedestal because they just like them better.
But no. Not even that. It's worse. So the competition that happened was, or sorry, the person that he declared the winner, the gold medalist, and the fastest national swimmer in this competition for the 500 freestyle, 500 meter freestyle, was born in Sarasota, Florida, but is currently a student of the University of Virginia. So they have no collegiate ties to the state of Florida, and he is basically a viewer, a audience member that just goes, I don't. It would be like me going and saying, Tyra girl, Miss Tyra Sanchez, you didn't win RuPaul's Drag Race. I'm just going to go right on over here and give it to, pick someone that actually has talent.
Juju.
Raven. Or saying, BB girl, I'm sorry, you didn't win. I'm going to go ahead and give it to Angina. Or I'm going to go ahead and give it to, again, pick aim. Although I don't come for me, I do like me some BB Zahara Benet for performance. Cameroon. Although she does have this one dance move that's like the bird legs that she can't get away from.
That's okay,
it's
because
like her go-to.
You know Georges is over there punching that ghost. Everyone's got their thing. Yes. Everyone's got their thing. It's all right.
Love it. So yeah, it's just it's insane that DeSantis is putting his foot in it at this moment. He has no authority. The proclamation, by the way, has no authority. It has no real effect other than to commemorate a event or a person. And he actually even extended the application of a proclamation by doing this, because again, this has nothing to do with Florida's history, and nothing. So yeah, it's just some of the things that he said that just really got my blood boiling was the NCAA is perpetuating frauds, made it a noun, frauds on the public, and that they are putting their own ideology, meaning the NCAA, their own ideology ahead of the opportunity for women.
I am so glad to hear he's so concerned about women in sports for once. Except that, he actually doesn't care about women in sports. He really just cares more about marginalizing trans people.
He gives two things less than a shit about women in general. Otherwise, he wouldn't be supporting all these abortion laws and wouldn't be doing half the other shit that he's doing that impacts women.
He's disgusting.
Yeah. So, Zach, what's new?
That's right. It's the segment where we talk about the news that caught our eye this week. And Mama, this week the news was full of nothing else but Ketanji Brown Jackson's confirmation hearing. It was...
And work, girl.
Work.
Work
Our pussy out, mama.
Her soundtrack is just Rihanna's Work.
on a loop. She did such a fabulous job. If you were not able to witness any of it, it was an event. It was 4 fun-filled days of poor Judge Jackson sitting there having to endure some bullshit from some Republicans and some nice moments from some Democrats.
It's basically been the experience that we all had watching Latrice Royale sitting on Snatch Game.
Oh.
The tomfoolery that we've had to deal with.
The shenanigans. The unprofessionalism. Far too much. So, 4 days is how long the confirmation hearing lasted. It began with opening remarks from each of the senators who sit on the Senate Judiciary Committee, and then day 2 was questions from each senator, day 3 follow-up questions from each senator, and then day 4 closing remarks from each senator. Days 1 and 4, poor Judge Jackson, she had to just sit there the whole time and just listen and just get vomited on with all of the chicanery, tomfoolery, shenanigans. But she handled it like a champ. Marvelously.
She was fantastic. I mean, just to sit there and have to listen to the bullshit that she had to listen to that was aimed at her, but not having the ability to provide retorts to those things.
Yeah.
I would not have been able to do it. So kudos to you. Kudos to you, Judge
Kudos
Jackson.
to Judge Jackson.
Thank you for having decorum.
Unlike many of your Republican senators who were there. So, in order to really sort of get into sort of what's happening, you might be wondering, well, what is this confirmation hearing all about? How does it happen? Why does it happen? Who's there? Why are they there? So that's a perfect segue into our crash course. So we're going to talk a little bit about how a Supreme Court justice is nominated and selected, and also who are these people on the Senate Judiciary Committee. So it is one of the responsibilities of a president to select justices to sit on the Supreme Court. Whenever there is a vacancy by retirement or death, in this case it's Justice Breyer who is retiring, the president makes a selection. He nominates someone to become the new justice. The nominee then has to be confirmed by the Senate. That includes having a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing, which is what's happening now. And then after that, it then goes to a full vote in the Senate. So the Senate Judiciary Committee is the committee for the judiciary on the Senate side. Exactly what it sounds like. And there are 22 members. There are 11 Democrats and 11 Republicans. Many of the people you have probably heard their name, and you probably know a little bit about them, and some of them you probably never heard of. On the Democrat side, the chair, the head guy in charge, is Senator Dick Durbin, who's from Illinois. Also on the Democratic side are Patrick Leahy, who is from Vermont, Dianne Feinstein of California, Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island, Amy Klobuchar from Minnesota, Chris Coons from Delaware, Richard Blumenthal from Connecticut, Mazie Hirono from Hawaii, Cory Booker from New Jersey, Alex Padilla, I'm not sure how he pronounces that actually, from California, and Jon Ossoff. Jon Ossoff. He could get it. Any day. He could get it.
Yeah.
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 Cutie patootie. From Georgia. And then
And
on
Democrat.
Yeah. I know.
I don't have to gag him this time. Look at you, Josh Hawley.
Unless you want to.
I mean, if you're into that, I'm not.
into that.
I'm saying it's not a requirement.
Exactly. And then on the Republican side, the ranking member, who is almost serves as like who is the highest member of the Republican side, is Chuck Grassley of Iowa. And then there's Lindsey Graham. Oh God, excuse me. Oh, got a little.
Clean up on aisle 4. Clean up
Please.
on aisle 4.
Oh, Lindsey Graham of South Carolina. John Cornyn of Texas. Mike Lee of Utah. Ted. Oh, Ted Cruz. Oh, God.
I'm surprised that he could come back from the Caribbean for this.
Gosh. Ted Cruz of Texas. Ben Sass of Nebraska. Josh Hawley of Missouri, who I can't stand, but he can also get it. Tom Cotton of Arkansas, John Kennedy of Louisiana, Tom Tillis of North Carolina, and Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee, the only female Republican on the committee. These 22 folks went back and forth, alternating between Democrat and Republican, with the opening remarks and with questions and follow-ups and closing remarks with Judge Jackson. And the chicanery and tomfoolery was just ridiculous on the Republican side. Lindsey Graham asked Judge Jackson what religion she was, how religious she was, on a scale of 1 to 10.
Yep.
How often she attends church. Her specific religion, not just a generic Protestantism, but he wanted something specific. She handled it with such grace, at first opting to answer some of the questions, though timidly. And then at one point, he just went a step too far. And she said, "Oh, no, Mama, I ain't going there." She said it a lot more professionally than that, though. But she shut him down and said, "No, because, Mason, what does Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution say?"
Oh, you mean that we won't have any religious test to hold public office?
Precisement. Exactement. Yes. So, I guess Lindsay just forgot that. And she reminded him. Oh, she reminded him ever so gently.
Now, I will say, because I kind of went on a little bit of a black hole on this, because I wanted to know, there was something that came up later with the fact that, and I think it may have been Lindsey Graham that said this later on, about how when the confirmation hearing was going on for Justice Amy Coney Barrett, that her faith was also brought up and brought into question by Democrats. And I went, hold up. Would Democrats do that? So I went back, and yes, they did. However, the way that Democrats framed it for Amy Coney Barrett wasn't that they specifically asked her what her religious affiliation was. It was bringing into question documents and statements that she had signed that were released to the public that were declaring her positions on specific issues that were issues of constitutional freedom and constitutional protections, specifically looking at Roe versus Wade and the right to abortions. So they were questioning her on her ability to separate her own personal and religious views from the bench, right? Whereas here, right, which is very different than what Lindsey Graham did in this instance, by point blank asking, Judge Jackson, what is your faith?
How religious are you?
I'm pretty sure that's almost a direct quote. Yeah, how religious are you?
On a
how
scale
often
of 1
do you
to
go
10.
to church?
Yeah. Disgusting.
Like, are you in front of her family too, by the way? Her family was sitting behind her for the entire confirmation.
I mean, in front of my salad?
Right in front of my salad?
Disgusting. So, another person who was just lovely was Senator Cornyn of Texas. Now, here's the thing about his line of questioning that was concerning. There are many who believe that when Roe falls this year, which it probably will, and if it doesn't completely fall, it will at least be cut off at the knees, that the next target will be marriage equality.
Yes, and by cut off at the knees, you mean just like the right to vote has been cut to shreds.
Exactly. So Mark Joseph Stern, over at Slate, he actually wrote up a really nice article about it, and the way that he phrased this is that the Obergefell case, which was the case decided by the Supreme Court that granted marriage equality to all 50 states, he said that loathing for Obergefell emerged early on Tuesday when Republican Senator John Cornyn launched a frontal assault on the ruling, then sought Jackson's reaction. He began by criticizing substantive due process, which holds that liberty protected by the Due Process Clause protects substantive rights and not just procedural rights. And the Supreme Court has used this theory to enforce quote-unquote enumerated rights, which are rights that are not written in black and white in the Constitution, but are also deemed to be fundamental, including your right to marry, raise children, use contraception, and terminate a pregnancy.
And what is really interesting is that not only are the radical Republicans going after gay marriage, they're also targeting heterosexuals in interracial marriages.
It did come up. It did come up during the hearings. And the fact that not only Obergefell, but also the Loving case, Loving v. Virginia, which allowed for interracial marriage in the United States. The fact that that was even put on the table, and the senator who brought it up later clarified it, like, oh no, like I didn't mean it in that way, but like it already sort of sent shockwaves across the country that this was now like a thing being talked about.
No, it literally is circling through the GOP and is making its way out into the general public that they are actively gunning for interracial marriages, and that they believe that the topic of marriage, period, whether it's interracial marriage, gay marriage, should be only defined and decided by the state. It should not be a federal protection.
Exactly. And that's just not the way things work. It's just not the way things work. You cannot say some states will grant these rights, like the right to marry, the right to an abortion, the right to raise children, use contraception. You cannot say, well, we're going to let some states do that and some states not. You can't do that with something that's a fundamental right. Except, well, we might be doing that with abortion later this year, and that's the domino that's going to be the first domino to fall. And when it falls, look out marriage equality and look out interracial marriage. Obergefell, Loving are going to be gone very soon after that.
Yeah. And if you want to talk about how things don't work, we can look at Miss Marsha Blackburn's line of questioning. Asking a judge who is to be adjudicating law and questions of law, asking, can you give me a definition of a woman? I'm sorry.
It's just Republican pandering. I mean, they're all out there trying to get their sound bites so that they can post it on their personal, Facebook pages or whatever, so they can rally
their
up the troops.
truth pages.
Barf. It's disgusting. But the most disgusting of them all, the most vile human being in the Senate, Ted Cruz. He is a terrible human being. I do not like him. I do not like Ted Cruz. I do not like... I was going to try to make a rhyme, but I can't. Because I'm so distracted by how disgusting he is.
Yeah, no. Even Dr. Seuss won't want to touch that one.
No. So he brought up a couple of things. One was CRT. He's obsessed with CRT. And brought in a bunch of books that are being used in a private school in D.C. that Judge Jackson sits on the board of. Many of the books were by Dr. Ibram Kendi, who is a fabulous professor, teacher, author, and activist in the anti-racism field. And is here in Boston. What? He brought in, Ted Cruz brought in several books by Ibram Kendi and some others that were all about anti-racism or critical race theory. and brought these books and said, these are the books that are being taught at the school that you're sitting on the board of. Again, a private school, not a public school.
And you can't teach CRT, people. CRT is a frame and a lens in which you examine existing systems and systemic approaches to issues. It is not something that you teach people. It is not a subject that you teach, especially in K-12 settings. Like,
Yeah.
No. Like,
And then, like, some of the things that he had a problem with was this idea of teaching children that 1776 we did not create, the perfect nation. How dare you teach children that? I'm sorry, do you need to go back and look what was written in 1776 or shortly thereafter? The fact that, black people weren't considered to be fully human. They were only 3/5 of a human. The fact that we didn't grant women the right to vote or the right to own property.
or the right to just walk down the street without male escort.
I mean, do you think that was the perfect nation? He's a disgusting person. And you know what? Nothing gave me more joy than when the news story came out about him in a Montana airport yelling at an airport worker because he missed his flight going back to DC. And there's cell phone footage of him yelling at this person at the counter. And the reports say that whenever he was not unable to get an earlier flight back to DC because he missed his flight, he said, "Do you know who I am?" This also coming like a week after he tells that incredibly false story about how rarely is there a time when he's on an airplane that the captain or a flight attendant doesn't come and hug his neck and say, "Thank you for fighting for us." Bullshit, motherfucker. I call fucking bullshit.
Do you think that man lets anyone touch him?
He's so disgusting. He's vile. He's vile.
Well, let's move down the bench to the other vile person that was questioning Judge Jackson and her integrity and the way that she handles cases. Mr. Senator Hawley.
Ooh. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Senator Hawley. Gross, disgusting. He can have it. Yes.
You can have him. I'm good.
I will take Ossoff over him, though. But yes, Josh Hawley had, I would honestly say about 80% of the questions coming from Republicans during this confirmation hearing was about one thing: child pornography. I really don't think it's an exaggeration. About 80%. So many questions about her sentencing histories when she worked as a district court judge, of how she sentenced people who were charged with possessing child pornography.
Yep.
They almost made it seem like... He brought up
specifically 7 cases, too.
Well, and they wanted to make it seem like she was somehow, like, soft on child porn. Like, do you know of anyone who is soft on child porn? Like...
And what's really funny is that they kept bringing up the DA's recommendations for sentencing. But Judge Jackson turned around and said, okay, well, do you realize that I also have to take into consideration their probation officer's recommendations?
Exactly. Do
you also realize that for the past decade that we within the judiciary have been requesting the Senate, which you're a member of, to review and refine and redefine your guidelines on sentencing on this particular subject? Why haven't you done it? I loved that she turned it back on them.
She did.
Because it's their job to write the guidelines that they sentence with.
Yeah, it is. She handled herself so well, and if you have not seen the beautiful exchange she had with the senator from California, Senator Padilla. I highly encourage you to go on YouTube and search Senator Padilla, Ketanji Brown Jackson, and the word persevere. It is emotional, stirring. She gets emotional during this bit. I fucking bawled my eyes out during that bit. It is a beautiful exchange, and I hope that that is one of the moments that continues to shine when we look back at these confirmation hearings, and not the bullshit and chicanery and tomfoolery that the Republicans tried to bring to it.
Amen. Now, I will say, I am hoping that she is confirmed, because it takes only a simple majority within the Senate.
Correct.
However, in order for that to happen, either we're going to have to go into a gridlock, and then Miss Vice President, Mrs. Kamala Harris, would then get the tie-breaking vote, or a Republican senator is actually going to have to flip sides and reach across the aisle and go, you know what? There is no rational explanation as to why we cannot confirm this individual based on her history and her experience. Because, by the way, she also has the most experience as a judge compared to 4 of the sitting justices on the Supreme Court combined, of the experience that they had when they were appointed.
Yeah, exactly.
She's one of the most qualified.
And she's the only one to have ever worked as a public defender as well.
Yes.
Yeah. She's marvelous and wonderful. And once again, like all things in the Senate, we will be looking at Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema and hoping that they'll vote with the Democrats. And if not, we'll have to... No, good Lord. I don't know. I pray for Mitt Romney to come join us or something. Who knows? We shall see. So, well, fingers crossed for you, and I cannot wait to see the first black woman on the Supreme Court.
Yes. Time for representation.
You know what else it's time for?
What's that?
It's time for our favorite segment, Mason.
Oh my God. It's mine too.
Yay!
That's right. It's time for I Don't Know Her, the segment where we highlight a queer person in history we think you should know.
So, Mason, who are we going to be learning about today?
Today, we're going to be learning about someone that nobody has ever heard of.
Really?
I found a good one for this week, honey.
Give it to me, Mama.
I dug way down into history, way down to those catacombs, and pulled out a fantastic name. And by me, I mean one of my good Judys gave me this name, and I went, ooh, I need to talk about her.
Listen, where would we be without our good Judys?
For real. Now, we're going to be learning about Pamela Coleman Smith.
I don't know her.
I bet you know her work, though.
Tell me.
Miss Smith is the hand behind all of the artwork on one of the most recognizable, actually the most recognizable forms of tarot card decks in the world. She is the one that illustrated what is most known as the Rider-Waite tarot deck.
Ooh.
But it has recently come to light, to the public's eye, that it should be called the Rider-Waite Smith tarot deck, because she was part of a 3-person team that worked on this deck.
Interesting.
So Miss Smith was born on February 16th, 1878. Okay, so just kind of putting that out there, let you sit in a little bit of the history of the moment that she was born in. We are talking about very, very close to the Emancipation Proclamation, just happening not even a decade before. Okay. So being a Jamaican American born to a Jamaican mother, white American father, very scandalous. And she moved between America, Britain, and Jamaica, which I believe at that time Jamaica was still a colony of British rule. Okay, it was not its own country. So Pamela Coleman Smith is assumed to be a lesbian. Of course, she is a figure in history. We can't go back and dig up her bones and, you know, knock on her head and be like, "Hey, girl, were you bumping uglies with your good friend Nora Lake for 40 years?" Because guess what? They were companions for 40 years.
Companions.
Girl, they were roommates.
And they were roommates.
And they were roommates.
Oh my God, they were roommates.
They were roommates. Miss Nora Lake was a spiritualist, a very well-known spiritualist. So they kind of ran in the same occult circles back then, even though Miss Pam was a converted Catholic. She still ran with a society known as the Golden Dawn, which is also insane if you know anything about the Golden Dawn, that they allowed not only a woman to join, but a black woman to join. So absolutely fantastic. But she was a notable writer, visual artist, illustrator, costume designer, verbal storyteller, fashion icon, stage designer. She also was a magazine editor for 2 publications at the time. And she also ran the press for a small press that was devoted to women writers of the time. She ran in circles with Ellen Terry and Henry Irving, who was known as the manager actor from the UK and was known for putting on fantastic Shakespeare plays, and was actually the one that brought Ellen Terry into the limelight. Ellen was a female who was brought on to play opposite of Henry whenever he was playing like Othello, or when he was playing Macbeth. She was Lady Macbeth. But the one that caught my eye when I heard about the circle that Miss Pamela Smith ran in was Bram Stoker.
Wow. Very cool.
And she even illustrated one of Bram's books, which was a book about Ellen Terry. So it wasn't Dracula. But she illustrated 20 books and even was the first solo non-photography exhibition to be featured in Alfred Stieglitz's Little Galleries of the Photo Secession. And her exhibit was actually the most popular for 2 years.
Wow. That is so cool.
She's phenomenal. And one more little tidbit about her that's related to her Catholicism that I found hilarious is after she died, her estate was left to Nora Lake, which is another indication that, hey, they girlfriends.
And they were roommates.
Her occupation was listed as spinster of independent means.
Oh my God. That is the most lesbianic description I have ever heard. And I'm calling all of my lesbian friends as soon as we finish recording, and I'm going to start telling them, I'm no longer calling you a lesbian. I'm calling you a spinster of independent means.
I love it.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And then you'll find particular love for this, but she was, when she was doing her costume designing and her stage designing, she was the costume and stage designer for the Lyceum Theater back in the day.
Very cool.
Very cool. So thank you, Miss Pamela Coleman Smith, for giving us tarot and for giving us illustration and just being an all-around badass in the early 1900s.
Well, that's who we think you ought to know this week in gay history. And that about does it for us here on the podcast this week. Thank you so much for listening. Please make sure to follow us on social media. You can find me on Twitter at ZacharyPenn48.
And you can find me on Twitter at Real Mason Dixon.
You can also send us an email at withagaytwist@gmail.com. Make sure to give us a rating on your favorite podcast app so that other fabulous queens such as yourself can find us. Also, if you can, head on over to Patreon and give us some support over there at patreon.com/withagaytwist. And remember, being queer
Is political.
Later.
Bye, girl.